We now move over to some more news updates. Former Philippine President is scheduled to appear before an international criminal court today following his recent arrest in Manila on murder charges linked to his controversial war on drugs. Duterte becomes the first former Asian leader to be arrested under an ICC warrant. He faces charges of crimes against humanity for allegedly overseeing extrajudicial killings between 2011 and 2019, both as the mayor of Davao and as president. Prosecutors claim he was an indirect co-perpetrator in these killings, which involved police and hitmen to target criminals, especially drug dealers. While human rights groups celebrate his arrest as a triumph over state impunity, Duterte supporters argue the Philippine government should not have surrendered him to the ICC, as the country withdrew from the court in 2019. If convicted, Duterte could face life imprisonment. We are joined for more on this discussion by Ross Feingold, political risk analyst. Thank you very much for joining us, Ross. Considering the complexities of prosecuting a former head of state, what challenges does the ICC face? I mean, this process is said could go on for months, even years, possibly.
Years are probably an accurate expectation based on previous cases at international forums such as this. But there's so many factors that are still in play. The first thing that his legal team is going to do is to challenge the process by which the Philippines put Duterte on a plane that flew him over to The Hague. And they're going to challenge that and say he didn't have his day in court in the Philippines, which he was entitled to as a citizen of the Philippines and under the laws of the Philippines. And if that doesn't work, they're going to say the International Criminal Court doesn't have jurisdiction over him because the Philippines withdrew from the International Criminal Court, the Rome Statute, long before the arrest. So there's a number of procedural challenges that are going to be made. Whether or not they'll be winning challenges remains to be seen.
So, Ross, obviously this has been said it's a huge win for the ICC. Okay, they failed to execute arrest warrants on people like Benjamin Netanyahu, Vladimir Putin. How effective really is the ICC of enforcing justice for high-profile leaders?
I think it's way too early to consider this a victory for the International Criminal Court. As we were just discussing, this court matter, this process, the trials, the appeals, it's going to be many, many years before the Duterte case is concluded. That is one thing we could probably safely assume. But also for the International Criminal Court, most of its cases move slowly, and several of the major powers in the world are not members of the International Criminal Court. They're not signatories to the Rome Statute. So when major countries are not participating, one has to ask, what's going to be the effectiveness of this institution, both as far as mobilizing resources to go after people who are wanted, as well as going after people who are wanted who might come from some of those major countries which are not signatories to the Rome Statute. So I think it's very premature for the International Criminal Court to do anything by way of celebration.
Duterte has not been quiet in his attitude towards drug users and people who commit crimes involving drugs. He carried this on, including on his flight to The Hague in a social media video. Do you see Duterte's acknowledgement of his role as a genuine act of accountability, or do you think this is viewed of more of a strategic role to influence public opinion or the legal process?
Those are very good questions, but it might just be that this is his style. It's always been his style to be extremely outspoken and extremely direct in his word choice. He doesn't really hold back. He doesn't practice diplomatic niceties, whether with domestic politics and domestic issues or when engaging with other leaders. He's famous for his insults of President Obama, for example, when their terms in office overlap. So this is his personality, this is his style. I would expect to the extent he could get messages out from where he's being detained in The Hague, he will continue to utilize this style. He's not suddenly going to change his style to be somebody who's looking to be accommodating. That's just not who he is. So I would expect him to continue to be very direct to the extent that through his lawyers or his family, he's able to get messages out of detention.
The current president of the Philippines, President Marcos, this has kind of been said that it was a domestic issue and it was a spat between President Marcos and the Dutertes. What can you tell me about this? And Is this a process now reversible, like an irreversible process? Now Duterte is in the Netherlands. Can he be brought back for possible trial in the Philippines?
There's a strong argument that this really was about domestic politics. Originally in 2022, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. ran with Sara Duterte, former President Duterte's daughter, and the expectation was that this was an arrangement that would facilitate Sara Duterte running for president in the next presidential election in 2028, because under the Philippines Constitution, the president can serve only one single term. So it was considered a deal where Marcos would get to serve as president now, and he'd be followed by Sara Duterte winning the election in 2028. Obviously, they've had a falling out. There's accusations that Marcos has a preference for one of his own relatives to run for president in 2028, and that's why he walked away from the arrangement with the Duterte family. So this is very much a matter of domestic politics. Now, whether or not Duterte would ever face court in the Philippines, that really remains to be seen. First, we have to go through the International Criminal Court process, and then the willingness of prosecutors and courts to put him on trial in the Philippines is a whole other issue entirely. But the record of Philippine prosecutors and courts putting people on trial, especially politicians, whether that's for violent crime or financial crime, the record is not very good. So I wouldn't be optimistic that he would ever face a court anytime soon in the Philippines.
Do you see, going back to the crimes or the alleged crimes that Duterte committed within his own time as president and as mayor, do you think that this might be seen by the international court as self-guilt? He has literally used vocabulary like slaughter drug addicts. How do you think this is going to be viewed within his trial?
We'll have to see the ability of the prosecutor to introduce that as evidence. The defense would probably object and say, this is just hearsay, random statements by Rodrigo Duterte, but it's not really evidence that he gave orders to police to commit extrajudicial killings. So that's going to become one among many procedural issues that will get played out as the International Criminal Court process begins. But up to now, no one's come up with the smoking gun, right? What kind of evidence do they have that he literally ordered the police to carry out these killings? Like, they might have to have the relevant police officers and officials come to The Hague and testify that Rodrigo Duterte gave them orders like that, if in fact he really did. And that's one of the important issues that will play out during the court process.
Ross Feingold, thank you very much for joining us.